Welcome back to the Your Golf Performance podcast. We're joined with a pretty cool guest. I used to watch a video called Tiger's Triple back in the day, and he was one of Tiger's opponents in the 1996 US Amateur. Steve Scott, he's a PGA professional, former number one amateur in the world. Welcome to the podcast.
No, thanks so much, Brent, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Mate, do you want to just start out? Obviously, I know a fair bit about you, given that watched that video about 100 times when you were a college golfer. But do you just want to start out and sort of tell our listeners a little bit about how you started in golf and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. But first, a real quick story about that Tigers triple. So I had the pleasure to meet Tony Finau in I think it was the 2018 U.S. Open. I'm friendly with his instructor Boyd Summerhays, and we're walking down the fairway, and he pulls Tony over and he says, "Hey, Tony, come over, meet this guy." And all of a sudden, we shake hands, and he's like, he said the same thing that you just said. I grew up watching this Tigers triple. My dad got me this VCR tape, and me and my brother Gipper, we would watch this video, Tigers triple. And so anyway, that's pretty funny. Yeah, certainly before the advent of social media and all of that. But I got into the game as a youngster. My dad cut a putter down for me when I was 5 years old, and I just took to the game right away. I played team sports when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, but I always liked I guess the individualness of golf, because I didn't have to rely on somebody to pass me the ball, or to be there to practice with me. At an arranged time, I could go and practice all day if I wanted by myself, and most of the time I would get out of the game what I put into it.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the lure of the game for me. And I played my first tournament. I was 10 years old, and I won a couple state high school championships in the state of Florida in the U.S. and just absolutely loved it. Absolutely, just took to the game right away.
So you're a PGA professional now. What are you sort of doing with yourself these days? You still playing much?
Mm-hmm. I play a little bit. I'm 46 years old. I turned 46 this summer, so I guess I've got about 3.5 years until I turn 50, and be quote unquote young again on any part of any senior golf I want to play professionally. But I've been a pro. I turned pro a few years after that U.S. Amateur against Tiger, the fall of 1999, and went to 6 USQ schools and never went overseas at all. But just kind of I stayed over here and made it to the finals one time, and had status on what's now the Korn Ferry Tour. Never had my full status on the PGA Tour, although I've played about 20 events over time on the big tour. Just never quite made it out there. And so after 6 years, I said, I wasn't making a living the way I wanted to at this game. And so I became a PGA professional and became a head professional at a few different clubs in the New Jersey and the New York golf-rich areas of the United States. And I went down that path for 9 years, and so lately I run a golf society called the Silver Club Golfing Society for single-digit handicap amateurs, and we set up events at awesome places, anywhere like in Inverness or Oakmont or Prairie Dunes, or
Yeah,
architecturally
well,
significant. We haven't quite made our way down under yet, but Royal Melbourne would be one that we would love to
yeah,
get
right.
to.
Yeah.
So many great ones. I do a lot of golf broadcasting with ESPN and PGA Tour Live, and I also wrote a book called "Hey Tiger, You Need to Move Your Mark Back," and wrote that a couple of years ago. So I've maintained a lot of hats in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, right. So just like going back on that, I'm sure you've spoken about this a million times in your lifetime, right? But like I said, I had that old VHS tape that I probably wore out. Can you describe most people when they watch those things? They're only just sort of watching the golf. Myself as a coach, I start to try to think about like what was this guy feeling? Can you talk about the emotional roller coaster of that day? You were 5 up.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, you lost. Everyone sort of knows that because Tiger went on to win his third. But can you just talk about how you felt throughout that whole day?
I was 5 up, and I shot 2 under par in the second 18 and didn't
Yeah,
win on
yeah,
a very difficult layout with rock hard greens and long rough. And Tiger, here's a crazy Tiger stat in that final of the U.S. Amateur. He hit 28 of the last 29 greens in regulation. So he never really put himself in a lot of problems. He was always in the game, and I played really well. And we went to 38 holes, and it was the second longest U.S. Amateur final in the history of the U.S. Amateur, the 123-year history of the event. So, I'm pretty proud that I was obviously in that final, and then to hang with a guy who has had the career that Tiger Woods has had for all these years, and to almost stop history that day. He won
yeah,
3 straight U.S. amateurs, and but for me, the emotions that day, yeah, definitely nervous, definitely, but nervous, not to the point where it was really affecting my game in a negative way. It was only in a positive way.
yeah.
The adrenaline. I think people love competition because the adrenaline of the game really, it's kind of like a superpower. It like pulls you along, and once you get done with the round and the adrenaline kind of leaves your body, you feel the exhaustion like
Mm.
very quickly. It hits you, but when you're in the moment, in the adrenaline, I think that's really the rush of tournament golfers, and why we do what we do. And I still compete. I love to compete, and I love that rush of adrenaline. And that's really, I think, what brings a lot of people back to the game is that rush. And I had that day.
Yeah, awesome. It's funny you've written a book now, Tiger, move your ball marker back. Is that what was the name of it again?
It's called Hey Tiger, you need to move your mark back.
I
And you
remember
can,
what I remember
yep.
watching that. So he nearly hit that putt without moving his ball marker back, right? So evidently he would have probably lost the hole and the match.
Yeah, it would have been over. I was 2 up with 3 to play, and never trailing in the match really until it was at the end, unfortunately. But I was 2 up with 3 to go, and I had a par putt from 10 feet on the 34th hole of the match, and he had a 6 footer for birdie. And his ball marker was right in my line, and I asked him to move it over one putter head, which he did. And I still had to make this par putt to force his birdie putt to mean anything. If I miss my putt, I'm gonna concede. That he's gonna 2 putt from 6 feet, and we'll go to the next hole and whatever. But so I get up there, and I'm really nervous, and I hold this great putt, and I'm walking off to the side of the green, and the next tee is this one direction off the side of the green, and I walk that way, and out of the corner of my eye, he's down in his crouch putting his ball on the ground. And I knew it. My conscious mind was like, yes, I made this great putt, and I really rose to the occasion in a high pressure moment. And but I realized not enough time had passed for him to move his ball marker. Well,
Yeah.
I just turned around. I said, hey, you got to move that back, Tiger. You got to move your mark back.
Yeah.
And he did. And it was something that
Pretty good sportsmanship.
I think, yeah, it is sportsmanship, but it's maybe real sportsmanship in other sports outside of golf, but in golf it's more of a commonplace thing, and it's what the game teaches you. And for me, it taught me those values. Like you as a coach, I mean, you pass on values, and not only swing knowledge, but the values of the game to your students. And so, for me in that moment, I had that ingrained in my mind from my parents and my teachers. And it's what you do. And in a moment where it would have been pretty advantageous for me to just keep my mouth quiet and potentially win if he plays from the wrong spot, it would not have been the right way to win at least a golf match. Other people would win other sports in that fashion, but not me,
Yeah.
and not for golf.
No, you're spot on there. So, as we know, most finalists from the US Amateur, winners and runners up, get a spot in the Masters. What
Hmm.
was that experience like?
Yeah, the Masters. Wow, the Masters was about as special as you can imagine. It was. I mean, it's the most perfect golf course. First of all, I mean, there's not a blade of grass out of place. To stay on the grounds there, I stayed in the Crow's Nest. I was 19 years old. They gave me the keys to a white Cadillac. That was pretty cool. I got to play practice rounds with Jack Nicklaus and Greg Norman and Steve Elkington, an Aussie,
Yep.
Justin Leonard. My tournament rounds were with Bob Tway and Fuzzy Zeller. So I really got a lot of knowledge that week, and I watched a lot of great champions manage their game around a golf course that requires a lot of knowledge and a lot of history, um, because it's not a golf course. One former caddy I know there very well, named Trip Bowden, he told me, he said you don't read the greens at Augusta, you remember them,
Yeah, right.
and you've got to remember them, and without the previous rounds of knowledge, you just don't have those memories, and the greens are very difficult to read because of that.
What were your scores like?
I didn't play very well. I really didn't. I think I shot 79 and 78. I played really crummy. That year, though, was those scores were they were higher than the norm, but that year the cut was as high. I don't know if there's been a higher cut maybe ever in modern history of the Masters. The cut that year
Yeah.
was 6 over par,
Oh, wow.
and the cut is usually even par, 1 over, 1 or 2 over maybe, but never 6 over. The golf course was especially firm and fast that spring, so it played extra fast.
It is a phenomenal place, though. Like I've been there a few times, and like you said, there's no blade of grass. Like everything, even like as I was obviously only a spectator, but they even perfected like the lines to the toilets or the restrooms, right? Like you want to go to
Everything.
everything was everything is perfect. There's nothing out of place. So, um, college golf. Now you're an NCAA All American 3 times.
Yep.
What what was your experience like at college? We have a lot of parents and kids that listen to this. What was your experience like at college? And if you can remember, what were your practice levels like or hours that you were putting into your game
Mhm.
back then?
Oh yeah. Well, I went to the University of Florida, and we had a great coach named Buddy Alexander, who was a past U.S. amateur champion from 1986, and so a great player, a great, huge knowledge of the game, how to practice, really a great competitor. Buddy was, and still is when he plays, even though he's up there in years now, but. College was probably the greatest time I've ever had. You get to travel around on the university's dime and play great golf courses and compete against players who are similar age range to you, and you really you learn a lot about how to compete, and how we played a lot of money matches, and whether it was for $1 or $20 or whatever we could afford, or maybe a pizza or a beer, whatever it was, right? But I think the key, I played a lot of golf. I wasn't necessarily a practicer. I didn't sit on the range for hours and hours, but I really played a lot. I love to play. And so, my golf swing was maybe not textbook, or super fundamentally sound back then. Right now, my golf swing is as good as it's ever been, and I understand my golf swing as well as I ever have. But back then, I just played a lot, and I understood how to play the game, and still do. But now I've got swing knowledge to go with that I wish I had back then. Before the advent of all this technology with launch monitors and tons of video equipment and your phone out there on the range. I mean, just all sorts of stuff now. YouTube. I mean, people learn golf everywhere. I mean, Victor Hovland learned how to play golf in Norway on YouTube,
Yeah,
and
wow.
so people, look where he is right now, top of the world in golf. So, learning golf is a lot different. So back then, I didn't have all that stuff, so I just played a lot. I understood the game by playing, and I think that's you've got to get out there and play a lot to really understand the nuances of the game. Working on the range, and it just doesn't quite do it. I don't think. You need a certain level of swing knowledge, but you got to get out there and play. Playing is super important.
And I think this day and age, and I've said this probably 100 times with all the podcasts that I've done, but like social media, like how many times do you get on there and there's a kid that just swings it absolutely pure, right?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if you do a lot of teaching or anything, but I'll have students come to me with their phone and they're like, I need to swing it like this kid. But they're forgetting like the art or the craft of being able to get the ball in the hole is the lowest number, right? So what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying there with, when you were the best amateur in the world, a lot of your stuff that you
Mm-hmm.
did was just getting out on the golf course and playing golf, right? Being
Yep.
competitive. And I think sometimes that's lost because people are trying to build the perfect golf swing rather than,
Yeah.
there's no tournaments on a driving range, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, other than maybe the long drive
Well,
championship, and,
that
and
always
yeah,
comes in my
but yeah,
mind when I say that.
other
Yeah.
than that, no, other than ones that are really that people really, most people are aspiring to, on the professional or the top amateur stage, or wherever you're competing, right? You have to, having a perfect golf swing. I always think of your score as a big pie, right? Whatever pie you want, cherry pie, pumpkin pie, whatever, right? It's so, but the golf swing itself is just one slice of the pie, right? If your golf swing is really good, okay, that's that one slice. But your putting has to be great. Your will to win, your will to overcome obstacles during a round of golf, during a tournament, you have to be really nuanced in that, and just the being a fighter out there, because there's so many bad things that happen during a round of golf. I don't care how good your golf swing is, you're going to get in some weird spots out there. So you have to learn how to overcome each environment that you put yourself into. I don't care if you're playing your best, you're going to have you know, 3, 4, 5 super challenges in a round of golf that you have to mentally and physically overcome. And so you don't necessarily learn that from practicing on the range or anything like that. You have to get out there in the heat of battle, and that's really the truth serum of golf, is getting out there in the heat of battle and learning what you are made of inside, not just your pretty golf swing, because that's only going to get you so far, but what is, when you have that 10-footer for bogey after you've just hit it out of bounds, like, what are you made of? Can you make that putt, or are you going to wilt under the pressure, or are you going to rise to the occasion? And those things, you can't, you have to, that's, it's as or more important, I think, than the fundamental nature of your golf swing or your putting stroke or whatever.
Completely agree. We're just going to take a quick break here to talk about one of our partners, golfperformancestore.com.au, the first place you should go for all your golf training aid needs. It's the number one supplier in Australia with brands such as Back to Basics, George Genker Sports, Eyeline Golf, Well Putt, Tour Striker, Super Speed Golf, Pro Sender, and many, many more. Head to golfperformancestore.com.au, use the code YGP10 for 10% off the entire store. And remember, the golfperformancestore.com.au should be the first place you go for all your golf training aid needs. Steve, I'm going to ask a question that is probably a little deep, but what was your headspace like after, say, the US Amateur and Tiger a few years later took off? And, you were still obviously doing great things. I had a look and seen you were world number one amateur in 99, right? So it
Yep.
wasn't like, he took off and you didn't. You were still doing good things. But how does it, obviously, I'm trying to educate the kids on how tough of a game this is, right?
Yeah.
How was your headspace around the fact that Tiger went off and had the career he did versus yours when you could have beat him in
Yeah,
that match?
that's a great question. I think immediately my headspace. Whenever you kind of get to a spot where I did and he did. We're on national television playing for the arguably the greatest amateur championship in the world, and um, I think it's easy to put pressure on yourself afterwards, like trying to live up to that that level of play but it's really hard to achieve that time and time again because that moment in time will never be replicated, right? Tiger going for golf history, and that day where my adrenaline was pumping so hard, where and my focus was so sharp. I think that's the hardest thing to try to replicate every time I go out and play. And sometimes I do it even to this day, but I think like like for example, immediately after that, I went into college golf. I was going into my sophomore year at Florida, and I went from the U.S. Amateur and NBC national television cameras and 15,000 people watching us in person, then going to a college event and having zero cameras, nobody watching us. Like it was honestly, it was kind of a letdown. It was really
Yeah,
like that was kind of it was hard not to feel that because of what I had just experienced. So like that was kind of tough to get over right away. I put a lot of pressure on myself, probably too much, to keep performing at that level, and that was not really smart. I think it cost my putting, left me for a little bit. I basically I got the yips when I was that next year. I had some putting issues that I have overcome in various ways since, but I think putting overall probably kept me from playing the professional game at the highest level that I wanted to play it at. Um, there's a confidence that guys have and gals have when they get out there and they're playing great and they're holing putts all over. There's a certain level of confidence that you have to have,
yep.
and if you're one notch below that, you're probably not going to make it at the highest level. And so, you might make it at the, reasonable amateur level or the club level or, whatever the case is. But I think that it's difficult not to go down that road of trying to replicate that great play that you had. And so you have to. I don't know. I think the lesson that I learned is that you just have to uh, you know, you got to realize that you're not always going to have your best stuff,
Yep.
but there's a difference between being a good player or a great player and just playing good golf. Do you
Yep.
understand what I mean? Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like you could be a bad player, but you're playing really good golf, like in this time period, but your fundamentals and all your stuff isn't good. Like my technical game was I would say was average, but I was really playing well because my competitive level was off the
Through the roof.
charts.
Yeah,
And so, like that kind of carried me through. And so I think that, there's a balance there, but no, it's not easy. There's
yeah,
nothing easy about trying to make it at the highest level. But having a pretty golf swing is a part of that, I think.
yeah. The golf coach is coming out of me, and when you said, obviously you had a pretty good amateur career. What did you try to fix in your putting? What was the big issue?
There I think there was like there became this the pressure that I put on myself to play well. There became a short circuit between my brain and my hands,
Yeah.
and I still have it to this day. It's the weirdest thing. It's nothing I asked for, but if anybody out there that's listening to your podcast has experienced the yips, um, it's kind of it's a mental it's a mental issue that leads into a physical nature, I think.
Yeah.
Whether it's a lack of confidence or whatever the case is, and when you don't see yourself perform the way you can perform, there's this panic button that you can hit. And for me, I pressed that panic button one too many times because I didn't quite understand, where my baseline was of my game. I was very hot and cold. My hot was really hot, but my cold was really cold because I never understood where, like my exact fundamentals that I really needed to always go back to.
Yeah.
And so, if somebody's working with you or another coach, I mean, that's, your coaching is just a lot different than it was 26, 7 years ago. And so, I wish I could go back, but I still have the faith and the dream, I guess, now of maybe playing some senior golf and playing at a high level because of all the things that I've learned over time, and
Yeah.
and now my technical golf game is as good as it's ever been. So, that's kind of I guess, we always have to have something to chase, don't we? And I think that's
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
I look forward to maybe chasing here in a few years. You never know.
Well, let's talk about pro golf. So you did turn pro and you did
Yep.
have a couple of wins, right? So do
Yep.
you want to just talk to us about those two wins that you've had?
Yeah, I was on the what's now PGA Tour Canada. I played in Canada for a few years and won a couple times there, and definitely saw some good success. But when it came to the Q School, I didn't quite get it done. But those events that I won in the Canadian Tour were pretty cool. My first victory was in a 6-hole 6-man playoff. One of the players in that playoff was I believe he's a New Zealander, Steve Alker, who's playing
Yeah.
great on the PGA Tour
So-
Champions.
yeah.
He's not an Aussie, is he? I think he's New
No, no,
Zealander.
no. Yeah, he's over the pond.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So you don't quite claim him, but he's playing great golf now, and so he was one of those players in that playoff that I beat. And so that was in Vancouver, and then the Canadian Tour also had an American swing uh, before it. When it was still too cold up in Canada, so I won a Canadian Tour event. It was in near Houston, Texas, and that was televised live on the Golf Channel, and I beat a couple past U.S. Amateur champions, Hank Keeney and Jeff Quinney,
Wow.
by a couple shots there, and got interviewed live on the Golf Channel, and I had a great 2 putt on the last hole to do it, and like that was super fun. I'll never forget those 2 wins for sure.
What was the difference between being a top line amateur and playing
Mm-hmm.
professional golf? I mean,
Uh,
the answer might be now that it was your putting, right? That sort of got into your head or something like that. But did you
yeah, I,
find
I
any other
think
differences?
it's it's when you turn pro. I think there's a line that you cross from amateur to pro golf that some people do it well and some people don't. For me, I didn't come from a lot of money. My family was, middle class, and we didn't have all these fancy country club memberships at these great places, and I was mostly a public course kid filling divots at a local public course so I could get privileges. And lo and behold, I make it to the finals of the U.S. Amateur doing that. So
Yeah, that's
that
mad.
was pretty wild story in itself. Um, uh, but I think the line but amateur golf, you play more for the love of it and just trying to win the trophy. When you turn pro, you're trying to do that. You're trying to win the trophy, but you also have to be content with finishing 30th or 40th. And for me, I never loved doing that. I didn't like just kind of being in the tournament but not in contention. And amateur
Yeah,
golf, I felt like I was in contention more, and that was a lot more fun to me. It wasn't fun
yeah,
just to barely make the cut. And so when I realized it first was I won the Western Amateur in 1999, which gave me an invitation to the Western Open, one of my first pro starts in the summer of 2000. And I'll never forget, I shot 75 the first day, and I went over to the scoreboard. They're printing all the people's names on the board, in nice, beautiful calligraphy. And there was over 20 players that shot even par that day. And I was thinking to myself, if that doesn't make you realize the importance of every single shot you hit during a round of golf, like one shot's a difference between 20 plus spots. And so, and you look at it on the tour every week, you know, 12, 15, 18 guys miss the cut by one shot. And so you always can get one shot back. You feel like it's one little putt or one decision. Maybe you laid up to the wrong yardage and you made par instead of making birdie on a par five. And, all those little things as a pro golfer are so magnified that they're not that way in amateur golf. And I think that's the biggest difference. And probably the toughest thing, and probably another tough thing that you have to deal with, you're not only playing against players that are your similar age range. Like college, you play against players 18 to 22 years old. When you turn pro, you're playing against players 18 to 50 or more. And so with massive experience. And so like that you have to pick up that experience. And that was challenging for me. I think getting to that top echelon.
So what would you do different now?
What would I do different now? I would have a better understanding of my golf swing.
Yeah.
I bet I would definitely do that. But I think I would
Did
be
you
more
get much
patient.
coaching of your swing, sorry, when you were younger or not?
I did. I had not to the even remotely close of what is today. I had a man, an older gentleman who passed away when I was 14. He coached me when I was between the age of about 11 and 14. His name was Ray Daly, and Ray, he really he instilled some golf shots and that in my mind, and how to hit hooks and fades and high shots and low shots, and how to use my hands really well. And but I think one other thing that we haven't touched on is the equipment for me changed. When I turned pro in 1999, the golf ball 1 year later went from the wound golf ball to the solid core golf ball, which changed everything about the aerodynamics and the trajectories of the golf ball. And so, like that. And I didn't have a launch monitor to tell me that, I needed to, I wasn't spinning at the same rate, or, my hook, I used to hit a pretty good size hook. And now
Mm,
the hook was just a little draw. And
mm.
I didn't quite understand all the reasons why. And I didn't, dive into all that. I didn't have all the technology to tell me everything. And so, all those things, the timing of all that was not great either. And so my golf swing probably changed a little bit without me even knowing about it. And then, lo and behold, I'm just not keeping up with those players who kind of learned more with the solid core golf ball and
Yeah.
had a little bit more experience with it. And, my draw, nobody really hits a good sized draw anymore. Everybody, all the top players in the world hit straight to fade. I mean, that's basically all they hit. So yeah,
It's
a lot of things changed. There's a lot of things that I might have been born 20 years earlier or 20 years later. That's maybe I would have changed that.
well, it's funny you say it because I was talking to one of the students that I coach recently about. I feel like golfers. This is going to sound crazy, but it's never been easier than it's a hard sport, right? But the
Yeah.
equipment these days, I just remember back in the day, if we didn't like hit it out of the center of the golf club, the ball was going every which way,
Yes.
right? If you were
Yes.
using a
Correct. 100%.
tour ballada, whereas now I feel like I'm a way better player now than what I was when I was grinding 20 or 30 hours a week. Um,
Yep.
yes, I've coached a shitload over the last 15 years, and I'm like you, I understand my golf swing now, and I know why certain things happen. Um, but I just recently purchased my irons, my driver, my putter that I used back in college in like the early 2000s.
Hmm.
And I'm going to get some tool balladas, or, I think we were a Pro V1 back then, but like the early days one. And I'm going to go and
Right.
play a few rounds with them just to see and try to remember. Like it felt difficult back when I was 18, whereas now you stand up and you can hit a 7 iron. It feels like the ball doesn't deviate much in the air, and
Yep.
um, I think what you're saying sort of resonates with me. You knew how to play with all of that sort of stuff, and like
Yeah.
you're saying, I remember having juniors that I grew up with where 20-yard draw for them was just common, and
Yeah.
I don't see that much at all anymore. Like,
Yeah, no question about it. I think that's what made Tiger so great right off the bat. It made his golf game. I mean, he could adapt to anything, but he could hit fades with the old equipment and not overspin it. Right, he could hit
yeah,
left to right shots and not have too much spin on the golf ball. And I think that's what really helped him. A lot of the players who I grew up with who played pretty good size right to left shots to maximize their distance, which is what I did. They didn't quite make it in the professional ranks. A lot of players that I was with on the 1997 Walker Cup team, for example. The games just it was different, and if you didn't adapt your game to the equipment, then you were going to be left in the dust. And so it's been very interesting for me to hear recently, and I don't know what Australia is going to do, but or do you follow the RNA or the USGA
I think it's all one
or
now. Yeah, like with
everybody with what they're going to do with this golf ball now and the driver size and I'm not really in favor of bringing the ball back. I'm in favor of making the ball spin, and if a miss hit, we're not going to stop players from swinging 125 or 130 miles an hour, but there should be some sort of penalty for hitting it off center. The ball should curve more. If you're going to take the risk to swing it that fast, a miss should hurt you a little bit more, a lot more than it does right now. And
yeah.
and I think that's where golf is. There's a real disconnect right now, and hopefully the whatever they do with the golf ball in the next few years, the ball will spin more. That would be my wish.
It's funny. It's funny you talk about that because a few of the guests I've had on around my age, like I'm 40, that 40 to 45, 50, we were all taught when you swing, you got to be balanced, right? Like, look at it now. Am I right? Like, you're laughing. Like, yeah, I
Scotty
was told,
Scheffler, Scotty Scheffler, the poster
yeah,
boy for that.
yeah. And now they're swinging off their feet because realistically, you can mishit it and the ball's still going to go roughly in the direction that you want it, and
Yeah,
50 yards further than when we were younger. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's a bit of a problem, but that might be just me. I don't know, but
yeah. So, have you got any advice for a young kid who, might be a decent amateur right now, a youngster, 13, 14, on, and they want to be a golf pro and they want to be the best golfer they can be? Is there any sort
Mhm.
of hints or tips that you've got for a young kid?
Yeah, I think I would try to find the best possible teacher that you can with whatever means that you have available, and maybe it's you. Find the best golf instructor that you can that has a great depth of knowledge, and stick with that teacher. I think it's very easy to you have one philosophy, and the pro down the street has another philosophy, then the next pro has another philosophy. All of a sudden, you can start having so many different conflicting thoughts in your mind, where it can, if you don't have a lot of discipline or a good team behind you telling you where to go and what to do, like you could get lost in all of the knowledge that there is out there. And you have to be really picky with the knowledge that you do put into your brain. I think that that's a big thing. So if you can find one teacher and stick with them and develop, essentially, if you can become your own best teacher from the instruction that you get from that one teacher,
Yeah,
right? Because your instructor is not going to be with you at every event. When you've just shot 78 and you need to go out and shoot a great round the next day to make the cut or whatever, like you've got to figure it out for yourself. And if you have to rely on your teacher back at home to fix your game, I think that's a problem. So I think my big advice would probably be to become your own best teacher. Know your golf swing backwards and forwards, where you don't need your coach right next to you holding your hand to make you better.
yeah. Mate, we'll wrap this up in a minute. I think the listeners are going to get some good knowledge out of this. I'm big on trying to obviously, get the feelings and emotions that people have faced during an event? Because I think so many kids feel like when they watch the guys on TV, they're feeling nothing. You know,
Mhm.
they just look, because they obviously control it quite well. Um, Obviously, you probably didn't reach, like you said, because of your putting, you probably didn't reach the heights that you wanted to. Did you ever deal with any sort of negative self talk? Obviously, as golfers, we all did, right? And
Yeah.
how did you get around it?
Yeah, for many time periods, that was the only self talk that I had was negative, which is not great. You know, it's you. I mean, look, I think the advent of there's a lot more um, golf sports psychologists out there who understand the game and understand how you should think out there on the golf course more appropriately. Um, yeah, there are times where you can get in a very negative headspace, and that's when golf is no fun. That's when you have to just kind of put the clubs away for a few weeks and come back to it, and find what you really love about the game, and realize that the challenge of golf is difficult, and you're not always going to play at the top of your game, and but if you understand your game well enough, you're not going to hit the rock bottom in your game. You're going to be able to go back to some sort of baseline of, okay, this is what I do when I'm putting well, this is what I do when I'm striking the ball well. If you can always have that to fall back on, then I don't think you will get it's knowledge is power, right? And so I don't think you will. I don't think I would have fallen in the as far of a negative headspace had I had that great knowledge in my brain of where to, where my home base was, where my baseline of my game was, and
Yeah,
I knew when I was playing well, some of the things I was thinking, but it was just always hard to replicate it because my golf swing had a lot of timing involved in the club face and whatnot, and that it didn't help my it helped my valleys be very low. My peaks were very high, but my
yeah.
valleys were very low.
What do you reckon caused the high peaks? Was just when the timing was on and your
Oh
brain
yeah,
was.
I mean, my ball, I could, I knew it was going to curve right to left every single time. I could aim down the right side of the fairway and curve it right back towards the middle every time. Had utmost confidence in my putter over time periods where I never thought I was going to miss. Like, I mean, give me 30-footer, 15, 20. It didn't matter. Like, I knew that I was going to make the putt. And the guys I was playing with knew I was going to make the putt. And I would make it. And that's like, it's fun to have that much confidence playing
Yeah.
golf. And it leads into other parts of the game too. So, but yeah, that was, that's when golf is fun, when the hole looks the size of a basketball hoop.
Did you ever get over those putts and feel like you could, almost, what's it called, like the shot tracer or whatever? Like, did you ever get over? Sometimes I would get over a putt and just feel like I'd just seen the line, like there was a red line on the green, and and you bang straight in. Did
Yeah.
you have that sort of
Yep.
feeling?
Oh, yeah. A lot. I did. There's no question. I mean, there's days that you see it, and in the days that you don't see it, you're trying to figure out how you ever saw the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just funny like that. Golf, I think when you do any sport, and even if it's basketball and you're shooting free throws, or whatever the sport is, there's times where you're just not going to feel it for one reason or another, and you're not going to see it. You're not going to, which is not going to give you that confidence that you need to execute the shot as well as you can. And it's the nature of sport. And I think the more that you can just realize that there are going to be those ebbs and flows,
Yeah, sure.
and understand that that's part of the game, the better off you'll be.
All right. So this book, you want to show the listeners or the viewers what it
Yeah.
is. Obviously, the guys that are listening on their iPhones won't be able to see this. So, do you
Yep.
want to just talk to everyone and let us know just a quick little bit about it, why you wrote it, and how they can purchase one?
Yeah, you can, if you want to go on my website. Well, the best way, I guess, do you have Amazon over there?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so you probably the best way for you to do it would be Amazon, because the shipping, if you were to go through my website at movethatback.com, I would sign the book for you and send it, but I don't know what the shipping is to Australia. It's probably a
Yeah.
lot.
But we
So
also
probably more than.
my listener base is about 50-50. We've got a fair few Americans that tune in as
Oh,
well.
good.
So
Okay. So if
yeah,
you're in America or Canada or somewhere in North America, I'd be happy to ship it to you. Go on movethatback.com and I'll sign a book for you and send it to you. But yeah, if you're in Australia, probably Amazon or somewhere else. That's going to be your best bet. I won't be able to sign it for you,
yeah,
but yeah, that's going to be the best bet. I wrote the book really. This story about the greatness of the game of golf and just really being a, a great human being. I think it was something that I just instinctively learned through the game, and there's a lot of times in life, whether it's in politics now or in sports or whatever, where people just don't do the right thing. I mean, it's plain and simple, and in American football, there or whatever sport, there's officials out there blowing whistles or throwing flags, or you're trying to get away with as many things as you can in other sports. Whereas in golf, we police ourselves. And I think that this book, and it's a story about that. It's a story of, not only why golf is so great, but doing the right thing at a time where it would have been really, like I said before, it would have been really advantageous if I would have just kept my mouth shut. I probably would have won the U.S. Amateur. But to win the U.S. Amateur that way is not the way I personally wanted to win it, and hopefully, most people out there listening to this would not want to win it that way either. But in other sports, it's not commonplace. In other walks of life, it's not commonplace. And so, this is a story that I think transcends golf in that realm. It's just be a good person. Things can work out great for you. They've worked out great for me, even though maybe I haven't made it to the heights of Tiger Woods on the golf course. You could argue to say that my life is better. My personal life is better than Tiger Woods is.
you can go
Is
down to the
and
grocery
many
store and
many players, many professional golfers out there. I'm very lucky. We've got my wife and I. We've been married almost 25 years. We have two great kids. She was the one who caddied for me
she
in this
caddied
match,
for you.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there's just so many things. I'm so involved in the game. In the golf broadcasting space and the public speaking space. Everything involved with golf, with my society. I mean, it's golf has been pretty good to me. So,
that's
I just
awesome.
wanted to share a story of what golf is all about and really what it meant to me.
Steve, we appreciate having you on the podcast, mate, and we obviously your time's very valuable, so thank you for coming on.
No, thank you. I appreciate you having me. Thanks so much. My first podcast from down under. Appreciate
There you go. Cheers, mate.
it.